WA motorists have so far escaped from having to pay road tolls, but there are renewed calls to establish a user pays system. The Economic Regulation Authority has released a discussion paper saying it's time to have a mature debate about introducing tolls. They argue motorists paying a fee to enter the city could ease congestion while helping to improve public transport. But while the government and opposition are quick to dismiss the proposal, what lessons can be learnt from the cities where tolls have become a fact of life?
I got a car.
Peak hour in Perth.
I got a big black shiny car.
The Great Australian Crawl. It's a frustrating part of commuter life.
Let's drive.
Are there ways in which we can actually change consumer behaviour, which means that we need to spend less on roads to cope with the peak times, and that will provide an opportunity either for less government expenditure and therefore lower taxes, or alternatively it might mean that we've got more money to spend on public transport as distinct from private roads.
Let's drive.
Getting commuters to leave their cars at home or at least modify their driving behaviour has always meant more stick than carrot, and the Economic Regulation Authority's paper is designed to generate public debate about a user pays road system, perhaps toll roads or a peak hour congestion levy.
It goes to that whole issue of infrastructure, and there's no free lunch here. We've got huge demands on infrastructure. We've got limited resources to spend on that infrastructure.
But what do drivers think?
No good. It'd probably keep some of the traffic out of the town and all that sort of stuff, I suppose, but people would find other ways to get around it. Like you can go to Sydney, punch into that thing, you can bypass all the toll roads.
If it makes better roads, I wouldn't have an issue with it at all.
I think it'd be disgraceful.
And why?
Because all these roads have been in place for as long as I've been alive. They haven't spent any extra money on anything, so why should there be tolls?
Major roads leading to the CBD are clogged, and with the Perth sprawling congestion is only going to get worse, much worse. When Fiona Stanley Hospital opens next year, it is expected to increase daily traffic in Murdoch and on the Kwinana Freeway by around 10,000 cars. According to the RAC, there are more than 2 million vehicles on WA roads. There'll be an additional million revving up by 2020.
Congestion is estimated it costs our economy around $2.1 billion a year. So we do need to have the debate about how people move around the state. It shouldn't just be confined to tolls or congestion charges. We need to look at public transport. We need to look at other aspects of mobility like cycling, and we need to also really look at our land use planning and how people are moving around the state.
While the RAC opposes placing any further impost on motorists, there are calls from sustainability experts who argue tolls or charges would ease congestion.
In London, for example, we have congestion charging that's been in operation since 2000. It's been very effective, raised more than $1 billion, and all of that money has been spent on improving public transport services. And I think if we took a similar approach here in Perth, it could be a great way to reduce the congestion and also finance the light rail commitments.
In Australia, 15 toll roads operate in New South Wales, Victoria and Queensland. But despite the calls, the government isn't interested.
We're not putting congestion charges or tolls into Western Australia, certainly not on the infrastructure that we've got at present.
What about longer term? Could you see it, down the track?
Well, I'm not going to talk on behalf of governments to come, but it's certainly not on our radar. And although I do think that the ERA are more than justified in canvassing as part of this review of microeconomic reform in WA.
But Lyndon Rose says West Australians are familiar with congestion charges, like those in the electricity sector with its off-peak and on-peak fees. He says applying a similar logic to roads could change traffic patterns.
And going forward, you don't have to spend as much money on those roads because you don't keep building for that peak capacity. I mean, there are people, presumably, who could make the choice not to come into the city at a particular time.
If you put congestion charging in the sort of central Perth area, it's going to encourage people to change modes of transport.
Labor's also opposed to further charges on motorists, but Transport spokesman Ken Travers says the government doesn't have the infrastructure in place to deal with today's congestion and will struggle as the city continues to grow.
More buses, more trains, and better utilising our public transport. Building satellite car parks with high-speed feeder buses that mean that you can get into the city quicker than driving to the existing car parks at railway stations.
In a statement, the Transport Minister Troy Buswell says the government is working on a raft of measures to ease congestion by recently adding a third lane to the North Bridge Tunnel, changing traffic signals on Stirling and Canning highways, and is widening the Mitchell Freeway. But with the loss in the state's AAA credit rating in September and flagged cuts to government projects, there are fears that transport infrastructure projects like the light rail or airport link plans may be further delayed.
We believe now is not the time for WA to walk away from its forward planning and to meet the demands of our state.
Typically in a lower growth period or a downturn, money should be spent on infrastructure that's going to stimulate economic growth, and this is the kind of infrastructure that would actually make the city more efficient and improve the productivity.
Lyndon Rowe is hoping the ERA's paper will prompt further discussion and submissions before a final report is handed to the Treasurer by the end of the financial year. He says while the public might not be willing to consider a congestion charge at this stage, we should at least change the way we think about it.
Well, surprise, surprise, the answer's no. But what's not explained in that process is what are the benefits? And is there a trade-off here? Would we be willing to have a congestion charge, for example, if it means we can spend more money on public transport? That's a different question to saying, do you want to pay money to come into Perth?
Let's drive.